Best people, an interesting conversation that could be one of the most important, critical, almost seminal ones you could listen to. It's a bit of an area that I'm know that there's a big decision to make on, but don't fully know how best to play it. And I'm going to share with you my views on it. This is Maneco. I think he's a stand-up guy, and we've had him on for a chat before. And he's got an interesting guest here that you're welcome to listen to this entire clip. I'll share it in leaders. But this to me is the important part because this is part of reset planning. This is part of what happens to debt in the old currency once the CBDC comes. And this is an area where I still have lots of scenarios and forks that could potentially occur. And there's lots of pitfalls about being too self-assured about one particular direction. For example, so this is all about the CBDC and what happens to the old dollar-denominated debt once the digital dollar comes in, how they will potentially leave the original legacy market to wither on the vine, and the relative crossover markets rate will be slowly decay, and what they gain or lose in all of that. And this deals in essence with our over-indebted state, the fact that they clearly are going to bring the solution, and how should you be positioned for this. So I often get people that say, you should be borrowed up to the hilt actually now on account of debt's going to have some degree of write-off. And this guy has some element of that. I just feel that there's a couple of assumptions in here that I don't agree with, but the concept and the discussion is very good. And there's quite a bit I do agree with too. So it's interesting to highlight philosophically where we could see the scenario casting exercise, which is not of a chart or direction, but of a agenda, which manner inside which they are most likely to pursue. So this is a thought game theory process video. I'm not going to show you a chart. You don't have to prepare for that, but put your head on and think like a cartel that is bringing a Bolshevik communism to the globe and actually seeks to impoverish, in my worldview, everyone that is not an insider. So let's let this play, and I will occasionally pause it just to make a comment. Because they both talk a tad slowly, I put it at 125. I was listening at it about 1.5, but I recognize you're going to need to take up some intel, and I'm dropping you straight into quite a very specific topic, and your mind's racing and you're wanting to just get to understand the nature of the discussion. So without further ado, just listen to this discussion. By the way, we've interviewed him before, and we'll ask for him to come back, Maneco. And then after a respectful period, maybe after the Christmas, New Year period, we'll try get his guest, who is an Englishman based in Switzerland, who was involved in the wealth management industry for a time and is now thinking through how these things played out.
So let's talk a little bit about CBDCs. I see that they're pushing it a lot. There's a lot of news that New York Fed recently tested it. The Bank of England is working on it. How do you see CBDCs? And I personally don't. I just think it's a replacement, a technological replacement for a system that's dying, the fiat currency systems. But maybe you've got a different opinion on it.
But I think it's quite likely that the CBDC will arrive, and it will also be the subject of the currency reset at the same time.
Correct. So on that 100% agreement. New technology to deal with the collapse.
At some point, the world is going to go into a crisis, or a country is going to go into a crisis. It might be the UK, it might be Italy, it might be the United States, but something is going to happen. Things are very, very taut in the financial world at the moment. When that happens, I think they will close the banks. You will wake up on a Sunday afternoon or a Sunday morning and hear the news that they shut the banks not open on a Monday. And then by Monday evening or Tuesday, you'll get the announcement that we're having a new currency, the CBDC, and don't worry, it'll be 1-for-1 against the old currency. But there'll be some restrictions on your ability to convert your old money into the new money. So if you're poor and you have a small bank account, it'll be converted 1-to-1 straight away. And you'll probably even find that you get a free gift from the government to get kickstart the system. It'd be £3,000 or £5,000 will be given to every citizen gratuitously to kickstart the system, the new CBDC. But if you have 100,000 or a million in the bank, you're going to be told, yes, it's 1-to-1, but you're going to have to wait to convert it to the new currency. Now, wait means never. We all know that, but they won't tell you that. They'll say it's a temporary suspension because we're in the middle of a crisis. The people are rioting in the streets.
So I kind of agree with this, but just how he's playing it, what they'll do is they'll have a certain amount that everybody, how I see this could play out, they'll have a certain amount. Every single person that has 10 grand savings in an account, subject to a maximum of 3 accounts, let's say, or maybe only one, they can. This is all whatever. It's not the most important part of this. So they're going to have a ceiling that's an automatic conversion. Plus, even, hey, look, this has been hard. There's been problem, a little bit of a furlough and a gift. Absolutely possible. Like, I don't think it'll be that generous, 3 grand, but it could be 500, whatever, 1,000. Get the economy going, a little bit of stimulus. Let's get everybody loving the new, giving a small feeling of wealth to the low end. Remember, he was talking about the poor there. So if you have, for all intents and purposes, I will say either no bank balances of any significance, like 50 quid, £100, up to $500 to about 10 grand, will be the working poor. If that's all you have across all accounts, that gets converted straight away. What they will do is we've got to stage process this. And as a result, the bigger amounts, so you're the guy with 100 grand, you get the 10 grand that all the poor get, as he says, even if, I don't mean people with 10 grand are just poor, but whatever the case may be, they have positive savings up to that limit. Let's forget the characterizations. It's a concept discussion. There's no woke insults to anybody intended. If you have 100 grand, for example, you get the immediate 10 grand, and then you get given a possible option of further notice undisclosed by date for possible other amounts to be converted over time, etc., etc. So that's just to better explain what I believe he's saying, how it might practically work. So they're going to bottleneck the old system. You've got this huge amount of money created in the old system, including debt, that is going to get bottlenecked and controlled and gate kept like a freeway toll gate. Everybody that was doing 300 kilometers an hour and the trucks that were doing 60 k's per hour, poor people, Porsche turbos, rich people, all got to slow down and stop and pay a toll, possibly, or at least prove who they are, KYC, tax returns, etc., etc. Give some paperwork, get scheduled, get let through. That is good, clean money that needs. So we want to catch the tax extractors. I want to add that in. For most people that are pay as you earn in the economy, they will automatically go through because the tax is ripped at source. Monthly on a pay as you earn basis, they're going to have little problem. It'll become more problematic for the people they hate most, the small business owners, the medium-sized business owners, the partners, the shareholders, etc., and various equities. Did you have a capital gain on this or that? Where you're living? Have you paid tax somewhere? Prove, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so let's let him carry on. But I just wanted a little bit of additional clarification because otherwise, what comes next will not be so clear.
We need to calm the system. So here's some free money, everybody. Go and enjoy yourselves. And by the way, the rich can't convert their money for a while, but they'll be able to do so later. So if you happen to own Apple bonds, they'll be denominated.
So the rich will get an allocation the same size as the poor, but the rest of their money will be put on a time frame. So just that's, they're not going to divide the world into rich and poor. They're going to create a bottleneck and everyone's going to get a similar, it's all equal, this world, etc. So Apple bonds, this is interesting. So a few seconds back.
Tell you that. They'll say it's a temporary suspension because we're in the middle of a crisis. The people are rioting in the streets. We need to calm the system. So here's some free money, everybody. Go and enjoy yourselves. And by the way, the rich can't convert their money for a while, but they'll be able to do so later. So if you happen to own Apple bonds, they'll be denominated in the old dollars. You won't be able to, it's still the old dollars. You won't be able to convert those old dollars until you've got the cash. But when you get the cash, you'll need permission to do it, and you're not going to get that permission. It'll be exactly like we had in Britain back before 1975, when we had the exchange controls. You need permission from the Bank of England. I mean, I remember when I travelled abroad the first time, I was allowed to take £50 with me abroad. Didn't go very far.
No, and sorry, go ahead.
So I think when the CBD, I think the CBDC will arise as a consequence of a crisis, and when that happens, there will be a limitation on how much of your old currency you can convert at 1-to-1 with the new one, even though technically it'll be 1-to-1, so you've lost nothing. But the advantage of this, from the government's point of view, is it's to all intents and purposes wiping the slate clean, because all of their liabilities will be denominated in a currency that nobody can use, nobody can spend. So if the crisis is generated by people rushing to try and convert their money into something, into anything, firewood or whatever they're trying to do, they won't be able to use their old currency unless the poor man will be able to use it, but anybody with any wealth, like the government of China, will be stuck. So the government will be able to print away its old liabilities without any worries at all, because nobody will be able to spend it, and it won't be able to affect the economy. The only thing which can affect the economy is the new CBDC, which will be, at least initially, touted as very sound money, at least until they start borrowing the new currency. But then they've got a fairly long lease of life, because they'll be starting for a debt to GDP ratio of effectively zero, because they won't need to count the old debt. Of course they will, from an accounting point of view, but it won't be affecting the economy anymore.
So this reminds me of Argentina, I think in the early 2000s. A lot of wealthier depositors had US dollars, and then it was 1-to-1 to the Argentinian currency, and then everything collapsed, and they closed the banks. And those people who had dollars were now given Argentinian government bonds, and they were also, it was called the corralito, and because a corral, the money was kept in a pen and you couldn't use it, and people were given the government bonds. They couldn't take over a certain amount of their money out every day. So basically, you're telling me that the CBDC won't change anything for people who don't have much, but for the people who have a bit of savings, even not just in cash in the bank, but even like stocks and bonds. Those funds are
Not stocks, bonds, and middle class people will be the ones that they hate the bourgeois. They hate the successful, intelligent that aren't part of their cult. You're the most dangerous. The poor peasants that they throw welfare checks at are easy pickings, and they see them as the worst and the dumbest of the sheep, easily fooled. You're dangerous because you think and you smell and you have a sense that something ain't right. In fact, the working class have a plenty big sense that things ain't right either, but they're not eloquent enough to make cases and show up, and they're not lawyers, and they don't get to be as obstructive potentially. They have more emotive responses and can be slapped down with police. So what he was at, so it's not actually stocks and bonds could survive, and I agree with what his guest is about to say. In fact, they could later have a very big run, as he says. I think potentially that's also true once they go into the new money system. So just to recap what he's trying to summarize, let's just listen to it one more time.
Fairly long lease of life, because they'll be starting from a debt to GDP ratio of effectively zero, because they won't need to count the old debt. Of course they will, from an accounting point of view, but it won't be affecting the economy anymore.
So this reminds me of Argentina, I think in the early 2000s. A lot of wealthier depositors had US dollars, and then it was 1-to-1 to the Argentinian currency, and then everything collapsed, and they closed the banks, and those people who had dollars were now given Argentinian government bonds, and they were also, it was called the corralito, and because a corral, the money was kept in a pen and you couldn't use it, and people were given the government bonds. They couldn't take over a certain amount of their money out every day. So basically, you're telling me that the CBDC won't change anything for people who don't have much, but for the people who have a bit of savings, even not just in cash in the bank, but even like stocks and bonds,
Not stocks.
those funds are going to be frozen under this CBDC.
There's no reason for the stock market to. The stock market might shut down for a week while the banks are closed, but there's no reason if you own shares in a blue chip company, there's no reason why you won't continue to own them. And likewise, if you own a government bond, you'll continue to own the government bond. The difference is the company will still be worth something. The government bond, you won't be able to do anything with it. If you sell it, you're going to get some old currency that you can't and not allowed to convert to the new one. So, to all intents and purposes, the old bond will be worthless. I think when they bring this rule in, when they bring in the CBDC in the middle of a crisis and freeze your old currency, you'll still be able to trade your old currency, but you'll be trading it effectively through the back door, and you'll be lucky to get 70 cents on the dollar on day one, and 3 months later, 20 cents on the dollar, and a year later, nothing.
Yeah.
So that's the key part. Create a bottleneck on the old, make it very hard for the big size of the old to come through. So essentially you're saying people on bicycles, skateboards, and motorcycles can get through the tunnel. Trucks, which are richer people with bigger assets, you cause a blockage, it's very hard. You need to break it down into lots of little bits. You'll get some of it through, it'll take a while. You're going to pay more. You're coming through repeatedly. There's a queue. People have to stand in the queue for you. There's a cost. As a result, the old money starts to have a black market value to the new money, which is free and is looking good. Remember, the CBDC has an image problem because it's surveillance money, and everyone knows that. So by putting it next to an old money that is now captured and is controlled and gate kept in its way into the new bubble. So what you need to visualize is what they do is they create, in essence, a bottleneck of old. Here is the huge debt system. Here is the huge by trillions debt system that is moving along like a superhighway. And you create all these lanes get squeezed in here, and there's walking people, pedestrians, bicycles. These are the poor people that continue to get through. There's still a bottleneck for them. There's still a gatekeeper. There's booms here and a control gate. And everyone wants to get into this new aspirational because it's the new system. You get a bit of free money, you get a gift. It looks awesome, so positive. This so negative. Limits, clearance, government. Did you pay your tax? This is a great opportunity to ensure there's no freeloaders all every day. So Mr. Pay As You Earn with very moderate savings goes fairly quickly into the CBDC with minimal headaches, but KYC obviously all the things they want in terms of the surveillance. So the surveillance gets added here in any case where it's not already implied and properly in place. The big money, particularly the debt, ends up being so constrained by decree and inefficient control that it leads to an Israeli black market. I'll always stick them in it because that's who they are, and insiders that do a black market wean off from here into the new system. And the price for that, first loss is the best loss, but I think it would start lower than 70%. Because essentially you're circumventing, let's say 60 or 50, and then very quickly becomes 0.1 to 0 in a very short time, which actually makes all bonds, so traditional TradFi, highway, which has all these other assets, Israeli black market, off-ramp, insider, some assets will go until eventually they taper that, they reduce the demand, everybody wants to get out, and it's largely zero. So the bond debt, which is part of the mega trucks, which are huge, and trains on the superhighway, bond with a D, bond debt, gets tapered into nothingness because they don't want to carry the liabilities. It is a reset at the end. They wish to get rid of the debt and all the incumbent problems they have to set the clock fresh again, where you will have a new economy with very low debt, which they'll immediately be able to start lending and providing leverage to, making all sorts of commitments of a new, more equitable green system, women better served, people of color better served, white nationalist racists made to suffer, affirmative action, lots of other horseshit social policies. Of course, during this period when they introduce and start tapering aggressively here is your problem, reaction, solution period, which will span some time. BLM will go and riot. There will be all the usual supply chain realization. This is all your problem, reaction, solution period, which we'll just start putting in a square here. Problem, reaction, solution. I just can't do the P properly. Problem, reaction, solution period. So you start to taper the ability to move in the traditional financial system. Banks are shut down, social unrest, etc., etc. We've discussed this ad nauseum. I don't want to get too lost on that. The problem with the bond is eventually the bond values are tapered to essentially zero. So this question then becomes, so what actually happens to debt? Because there are people of the view that it could be a very good time to be loaded up on debt and to buy things that will retain value. For example, gold and silver would be at the top, but you could buy diesel generators, rainwater harvesters for your home, all these kind of things that could do that. My big concern is if you loaded up too high on debt, as part and parcel of crashing the bond game. Let's change color and go to pen. Part and parcel of crashing this through to naught, zero, is an interest rate spike. The problem being that in the old dollars, so this is all old dollar, non-digital dollar, new digital currency, whatevers, so in the event of crashing that, rates go up. So if you've borrowed to the hilt at the death here with a bank because you're working on the basis that the old dollars are going to be trapped, particularly big amounts, and they're going to be tapered away because that's what they want to do. They want to kill their obligations on bonds, which will also kill pensions, which will be part of the UBI system for the elderly. They'll also go about culling the elderly as they usually do with the mosquito malaria and the subsequent mosquito bite cure. So they'll definitely do that, and that'll be contingent on UBI receipts. So by taking the money, they take your life, basically. So that's by being a recipient, they kill your pension. You are an elderly problem. They pay you UBI. You think that's awesome, but it has conditions, and those conditions take your life, lead to death as a pensioner. So that's the pensioner doom loop. Vaxxed to death, lockdown, health killed, cancer, various other things. Gee, the elderly just aren't surviving. There's so much pain and suffrage. So they kill your debt. They initially, until you're forced into, and they've done the problem reaction solution, the rates are going to go up across the world. This is hyperstagflation. They then need to crush the inflation, and the best way to do it is a demand killing event. So here you get BLM riots, lockdowns, monkeypox. Now that they've had this power, they're not going to stop exercising it. They're not going to have it taken away. And to retain power, you have to exercise. If you want a strong bench press, you've got to keep benching. If you want to be good at beating people up and suppressing them, you've got to keep beating people up and suppressing them. That power wanes away and people get stroppy again, and then they need a slap down again. So that's how they do it. So this is in essence rate spikes, and this is my concern. Now, in that environment, you've got to ask, what does equity do? Equities will potentially crash very hard. Indebted property homeowners will potentially not be able to pay their old dollar debts. In the pre-constriction phase, so we're coming up to the problem reaction and the solution, which will bring you into this really tight gateway with the booms. But the problem is you have to survive this tapering process that I've put here with the blue arrows, and or deal with the criminals that are set up to give you a gateway in here at a chronic cost. So this is black market route, that's official route. The official route is going to be at a one-to-one basis, but it's going to have almost be impractical for anybody that has any form of business, that could have tax queries raised, that has substantial amounts. You're going to be put on the slow road. If you're not a simple PAYE kid on a bicycle or a skateboard coming through here, you're, as a wealthy person, you are an articulated lorry with 3 containers in trailer. What's a truck and trailer situation? You're going to be put on the slow road, and that's going to be like a big clogged path, and you just ain't going to be getting through. And in the meantime, this market, the black market's going to be doing that. So they will taper that, and that will kill the bond debt. But during that period, the rates that will be owable on it will be high until such time as there's default and the rates are unpayable. That brings you into the problem reaction solution, blue box, the later problem reaction. So the tapering starts before the problem reaction solution. But that causes the eventual crisis, that causes an acceleration in this tapering process. That sees you end up where you are. And that sees a lot of money needing to get out of bonds, but trapped in old dollars. And because of scale and nature, you have to take the loss as a bond holder. So this is why I've continued to say, and George was saying, well, short-term bonds look good because, the dollar's going to pull back. I don't ever want to be in the bonds because the music could stop this Sunday morning. Banks are all bust. Credit Suisse is having a debtor run. You will be killed, whatever you put in there. Potentially down to 0.1 and 0. Or you could be faced trying to, in a massive queue here, where you'll be told how lucky you are you're being serviced by black market Israelis. You're going to be tapering. And every time you delay about the haircut you're getting, the new price is even lower. And the principle of first loss being your best loss, even if it's a 65% loss, absolutely applying. And you're not going to want to take that 65% loss on your bond portfolio or your money at all. You're going to think, well, government or somebody's got to do something about this. Don't forget the social consequence of the death loop as well. Here, the pensioner is going to be absolutely killed, UBI, with conditions on, and they will be health related because you're a pensioner. Conditions, health, and that health will be the cure to your life, which is, of course, death. So long chit-chats, lots of scribblings. So let's just recapture that thread a little bit.
Won't change anything for people who don't have much, but for the people who have a bit of savings, even not just in cash in the bank, but even like stocks and bonds, those funds are going to be frozen under this CBDC.
There's no reason for the stock market to the stock market might shut down for a week while the banks are closed. But there's no.
But as everybody queues for cash, it will crash, but it will be phoenixed later once you're through the bottleneck, and most people are through here, and everything that needs to be given a haircut has been given. And in fact, you'll then have a debt-free world, and you will get a pump. So you're going to get a major dump on stocks, providing you are never a forced seller. Equities could be a great buy in businesses that survive, particularly possibly businesses that have debt in dollars that they will also get rinsed, which is why I was really interested by the Apple example that has raised debt in spite of being a hugely cash generated company. In some senses, the original reason was the Trump tax cuts. So they initially had most of their profits offshore, didn't want to bring it on until Trump gave that window of opportunity, and they repatriated all their profits. Well, in the same way, if they're building up profits offshore, et cetera, they can borrow and against those profits that are offshore again, and then that debt gets killed. That debt gets killed. So those people who lent, Apple owners, are getting killed, not because Apple went bankrupt, but because the financial system has collapsed. They continue to make devices which they sell in CBDCs, and those bondholders have lost everything on account of they are locked in at old dollars. They're locked in at old dollars. Fucking hell. Give me the fucking pen. They're locked in at old dollars. And I'm sorry, we're on the system of new dollars, and you can either pay the Israelis and get 10% of its worth, and it's tapering and dropping every day and will eventually be zero in a space of 6 months. Done. Killed the old system. Maybe 3 years, maybe 2 months, 1 month, 3 weeks. It doesn't matter. They're going to put the old dollar system on the vine, withering on the vine. How long they take people to accept, they will allow, how long before people realize they've lost their money? I realized on FTX, my money's gone. I'm getting nothing. And he's not seeing any repercussions of any note. That's pretty much where I'm at. Anything above that is bonus period. I quickly wrote that down. Your first loss is your best loss. It's zero. I get there quick because I've been here before and I'm a trader. Legacy people that don't take risks are not used to seeing things overnight go to zero. They haven't had an FTX experience on that scale that many of us have. So what actually happens is they have to slowly let you realize that you fucked, so that you get a bleed out of anger, because that stops you from shooting a politician, for example. So in my opinion, during the rate pump and the initial bond market dump, which has already started and is pausing now, but we'll continue to see an even bigger event if the dollar milkshake theory comes back on, where the dollar dominance is used to start destroying everything else again. The old dollar then gets killed. Do we have enough time for that? Is it required, or could they just drop this on us on account of the banks being ready to collapse ahead of a major dollar surge? And we never get our dollar surge, and we think we're waiting for the dollar, and we're wrong, just like we were wrong that SBF was actually going to be a Zuckerberg and the company was there to exist, when in actual fact it was a controlled demolition like 9/11, and he is a dancing Israeli like every single other one. Yeah, we could be wrong. Maybe we don't ever get that extreme dollar strength, but the process of weaponizing the dollar will push rates back up again if the dollar goes up, and it will kill and start the process of tapering the bond. The problem is these people want to get out, and there's no fucking bid. You saw it in Japan for 5 days in a row. You saw the British government had to be the bid for an extended period. It is the biggest market in the world, but there's nobody who wants to be a buyer anymore. Now they're creating a bit of a recession. Now there's the likes of George, for logical reasons, and others saying, well, bonds could appreciate and the rates, and you'll still earn a yield, even though it's not an inflation matching yield during this period because it's fear. It's a very dangerous game because it's not a normal cycle. You are going through a real constriction in this intestine. It is being clenched. It's not a normal bowel movement that you're having here. This is the cramp of all cramps on the intestine. But I just want to make that point that the equities will crash. And the problem is you'll be forced out at the bottom if you need money because you're going through the problem reaction solution. Whereas a normal peasant, you will not have supermarket access. There'll be empty shelves. BLM will be rioting and stealing and taking everything you have. You'll need every single pound to meet your rent because landlords will still want their money. Various things will still be happening. Demands on your money will still be being made. Ability to secure goods that require spending on things that you normally had service for will still be required. Internet will be down. Communication will be down. You'll never be more dark. You will try sell your equities because you'll have far bigger problems. So the problem with investing in equities is that you're going to go through the mother of all constrictions before you will get recognized for the new economy. I'd rather save my money and wealth in silver and gold, buy equities after we have made it through, and this is now broadening out. So at that point where we start broadening back out into this space, which is now a debt-free space because they have successfully killed this. Let's bury it. There's the gravestone, the debt. They have killed the debt. You're now starting in a new debt-free world, or it's in the process of being tapered to zero by the black marketeers that can say, well, you can bypass that, but the going rate is here. So let's continue listening because this is super interesting. And I apologize for the interjections, but I want to just qualify that everyone doesn't just run off and say, awesome, buy shares. You're going to need money. You're going to need basics, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the lowest order: health, safety, security, food, water, energy. You're going to need that.
Reason, if you own shares in a blue chip company, there's no reason why you won't continue to own them. And likewise, if you own a government bond, you'll continue to own the government bond. The difference is the company will still be worth something. The government bond, you won't be able to do anything with it. If you sell it, you're going to get some old currency that you can't and not allowed to convert to the new one. So to all intents and purposes, the old bond will be worthless. I think when they bring this rule in, when they bring in the CBDC in the middle of a crisis and freeze your old currency, you'll still be able to trade your old currency, but you'll be trading it effectively through the back door, and you'll be lucky to get 70 cents on the dollar on day one, and 3 months later, 20 cents on the dollar, and a year later, nothing.
Yeah, but even with, let's say you have some shares of IBM that are worth $100,000, if you liquidate that, you won't be able to take that $100,000 in new CBDC and spend it because you're going to have a limit. How's that?
Well, it depends when you liquidate it. If you liquidate it before everything is being put into the CBDC, you're going to get stuck in old dollars that are going to go via the black market route very quickly to near zero. If you liquidate it post the constriction boom, you get through the booms, and you're now on the freeway that is broadening out to being a 16-lane highway again, you'll receive the new money, new digital currency, and you'll be bang a shoot and cock a hoop happy, although you'll be totally surveilled and all the back doors and everything that they want to shoehorn in, as they've already told you, carbon usage, blah, 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 all that shit. But you will at least be able to spend. You'll be trapped in the old world that is being tapered to die. That's the game. And they're essentially creating a hole in the wall for the good bits to come through and the debt to remain stuck behind and left. And a wealth reducing series of events that will see the middle class not be able to take their goods trapped in US dollars, bought off them for next to nothing by the black marketeer route, these guys, which will then come back into the system, but now owned by these guys, for which they've ripped your face off during this process. So they will own the black market route round the booms and gateway constriction. That's my assessment of that. So let's.
Well, we don't know how to get the prices and freeze your old currency. You'll still be able to trade your old currency, but you'll be trading it effectively through the back door, and you'll be lucky to get 70 cents on the dollar on day one, and 3 months later, 20 cents on the dollar, and a year later, there's nothing.
Yeah, but even with let's say you have some shares of IBM that are worth $100,000, if you liquidate that, you won't be able to take that $100,000 in new CBDC and spend it because you're going to have a limit. How's that?
Well, we don't know how it's going to play out, but I'd like to think that if you own a house or equities or gold and you sell it, you'll be able to sell it for CBDCs. I think the problem that the government will be facing is when we panic about the currency and we want to own anything but the old currency. I don't think they have a particular problem if you're selling something to have more of the new currency, because that makes the new currency strong. What they'll be trying to avoid is a complete collapse of the old currency by people getting rid of the dollar or the pound or the euro or whatever's falling in price.
I think I'd like to ask you because I get this question a lot.
Let's listen to that again.
Will be worth a week while the banks are closed.
It was kept in the.
So again, my argument is if you during the problem reaction solution period, before you've got through the booms and converted all your money to CBDCs, you're still on the old system. If you sell during that time, you will get a very low amount because the equity market will crash. You'll be desperate to try get some money for your needs during the problem reaction solution to buy a gun to protect yourself from the BLM riots. You'll get very low old money, and you'll have to hope that you can buy something useful with that low old money while its value is being tapered to zero. So that's a very accelerating wealth diminishing event. It would be far better to hold your IBM shares, shit stock, by the way, through this boom period into the green area where at least you'll get the new digital currency. Not that that's better for you generally, but in terms of wealth and money and spending power, it will be. And also the expansion will come back in now that you have a debt-free economy, and you'll actually get, it'll be near low, and the equity markets will potentially move. Let's just hear his response again to that. I don't think he's entirely nailed it, because I think it's the timing as to what stage you are in that you get the money system. Initially, you'll only have the old dollar option. At some point, they will say, when you are selling something, the people that are buying it can also pay you the new digital money. And that's when you should opt for the new digital money, in spite of it being surveillance, everything, because they will kill the old. But it's a difference between they will kill the old from a point of view of value, but the new will be totally spyware, but it will have the value. So we will end up taking the value, and that's how they'll get everybody to accept and sign on, because you will actively see the loss of value in the old and the growth in value of the new relatively. So I don't entirely disagree that he says they'll not want to see the old lose value too quickly. Let's listen to that again. They will want to see that, because that is the first thing. What pumped Bitcoin? Pumpamentals. Something else losing value, something else gaining value. The dollar was losing an immense amount of value relative to a pumpy Bitcoin. Everybody got into crypto because of pumpamentals. Yes, sorry, it wasn't the tech. We all got sold the story, but actually you just wanted coin go up.
And you couldn't use it. And people were given the government bonds. They couldn't take over a certain amount of their money out every day. So basically, you're telling me that the CBDC will won't change anything for people who don't have much, but for the people who have a bit of savings, even not just in cash in the bank, but even like stocks and bonds. Uh, those funds are going to be frozen under this CBDC.
There's no reason for the stock market to. The stock market might shut down for a week while the banks are closed, but there's no reason if you own shares in a blue chip company, there's no reason why you won't continue to own them. And likewise, if you own a government bond, you'll continue to own the government bond. The difference is the company will still be worth something. The government bond, you won't be able to do anything with it. If you sell it, you're going to get some old currency that you can't and not allowed to convert to the new one. So, to all intents and purposes, the old bond will be worthless. I think when they bring this rule in, when they bring in the CBDC in the middle of a crisis and freeze your old currency, you'll still be able to trade your old currency, but you'll be trading it effectively through the back door, and you'll be lucky to get 70 cents on the dollar on day one, and 3 months later, 20 cents on the dollar, and a year later, it's nothing.
Yeah, but even with let's say you have some shares of IBM that are worth $100,000, if you liquidate that, you won't be able to take that $100,000 in new CBDC and spend it because you're going to have a limit. How's that?
Well, we don't know how it's going to play out, but I'd like to think that if you own a house or equities or gold and you sell it, you'll be able to sell it for CBDCs. I think the problem that the government will be facing is when we panic about the currency and we want to own anything but the old currency. I don't think they have a particular problem if you're selling something to have more of the new currency, because that makes the new currency strong. What they'll be trying to avoid is a complete collapse of the old currency by people getting rid of the dollar or the pound or the euro or whatever's falling in price.
The thing I'd like to ask you, because I get this question a lot of times from the viewers, is what will happen to them?
They want the collapse of the old system because it's killing the debt. It's what they're leaving behind. It's what they're devaluing to nothing, so that they go through this process, this wall, this hole in the wall, where this bag of shit that is so big on their back can't make it through, and they come out without carrying it anymore. They actually want it. But what they need to do is to control the rate at which people see that assets, because those bonds are people's assets as well as other people's liabilities, are being tapered to zero. And that creates sufficient confusion that it takes a while. So they need a dawning realization over time that can't be overnight in a single flick of the switch where everyone realizes instantly you've had your wallet entirely stolen off you. What you need to realize is it's still there, but it looks like something's missing, maybe not as much as you thought. And then, oops, one of the cards seems to be gone. And then you realize the whole thing's empty over a time period. So I actually think they do want, it has to go to zero. They don't want to bring it into the new system. So it goes to zero and it gets left behind. But you have to have a lot of people that are standing there holding their worthless ticket stubs in a very long queue that haven't even worked out yet that they're wasting their time. And that by the time they get there, they're going to get cents and pennies in a pound. So they have to be tapered into a realization over time. That's my personal opinion.
Their mortgages,
as a
credit
guess,
card debts, and so on. When there is a reset and the old currency is destroyed, so to speak.
I think this would be great to have a particular problem if
their mortgages, credit.
So let's just get this question again, nice and loud.
Complete collapse of the old currency by people getting rid of the dollar or the pound or the euro or whatever's falling in price.
The thing I'd like to ask you, because I get this question a lot of times from the viewers, is what will happen to their mortgages, credit card debts, and so on when there is a reset and the old currency is destroyed, so to speak.
I think this would be great for the man in the street who has a mortgage, because his mortgage will be denominated in a currency that nobody can spend, and therefore it will be worth a lot less. So servicing his mortgage, he'll be able to buy the old currency at a few cents on the dollar, and he'll have a lot more money in his pocket to spend on other things. So in that respect, it'll be great for the economy, because the man in the street will have less outgoings. His mortgage will be effectively.
See, Clive Thompson is his name. Clive is highlighting what I think is the post actuality of surviving and still being good with that debt, assuming you first, in the death of the bond market, in the old currency,
over a short period of time, wiped out.
Assuming you survive first the devaluation of debt and the increases on rates that have to go with that, on that debt, and are not assets shaken out. Remember, get the goyim off the land. Everyone, debt is the Trojan weapon inside of you and your financials to destroy your wealth. If they make the interest rate so high you cannot afford it, the asset is taken off you, you do not pass the eye of the needle, boom gates, with your assets. You are stripped of them before. The goal, my friends, let's just be really explicit here, in my personal opinion. The goal is to pass the green line that I have said is the divisor where the two booms existed, and get as much of your wealth and assets with you into the new expanding society with their surveillance token that they are going to be enforcing on you. That's the goal. Going now, just before this event, in a bond destroying process, it's also an interest rate spiking process for which you may not yet have seen the real constriction. You're still in the 16-lane highway here. You're coming to the bottleneck, you haven't seen it. There's been a minor taper. 1 or 2 lanes on the left and the right have been tapered. The articulated lorries of wealth carrying you and all your assets and wealth are in the slow lane here where the lorries ride, where the bond market lies. The relatively poor or the young on bicycles and skateboards with just £50, $50 in their wallets, they're going to go through here quick as lightning, and they're going to just get flipped and they're going to be fine. You've got to survive the rate hikes on your property and still be the title deed owner when an accelerated foreclosure and aggressive system is most likely to occur. And they could, no saying, I'm well resourced. I could actually have $500,000 home or $1 million home with a reasonable deposit and actually fund pretty sizable mortgage. But if they push that rate to 60% for a few days and a few months and demand mark-to-market daily up cash flow requirements, they could engineer a set of circumstances. And remember, the intention is not to carry the middle class with full wealth through the great eye of the needle. It's going to be, in biblical times, like Jesus says, trying to get to heaven. CBDCs will be no heaven. But getting through the eye of this needle will not be the plight of a rich man. You will be stripped bare, naked, knuckled, and going through there. That's my opinion. So his assertion that everyone with a big bond or mortgage on their homes, which is denominated in old dollars, will be in an incredibly powerful position, could see a lot of people go raise debt who have very low debt. Like me, I have no debt. I have cash flow generative generally, and I could prove it and raise an immense amount of money, go buy assets. Well, I could have those assets stripped during this tapering period where the most aggressive grab of assets was likely to take place. And we know BlackRock wants your house. They're buying everybody's house. We know Bill Gates wants your farm. They're buying your farm. Don't go and prepper overspend until you are clear in your mind as to what could happen on the rate spike that is associated with the debt devaluation. The debt devaluation will have the most obscene rate spikes associated with it. And you could be a buyer and you could be a thrown out ex-owner in an incredibly short time frame. And it wouldn't shock me that given the turmoil, banks would have specially expedited rights to seize assets. This is part of what they want to achieve. So I think there's a real cautionary message that didn't come out of that. And it's one of the main reasons I remain debt-free. I would love to just go on a shopping spree and accumulate a lot of attractive assets that post the eye of the needle constriction will all still be mine and highly cash generative. But that's not what they plan for you, the middle classes, to give you great amounts of debt relief so that you can carry lots of assets through. That is not part of their agenda. You will own nothing and be happy. That is not the game.
Credit card debt. And the same thing.
Droid, so to speak.
I think this would be great for the man in the street who has a mortgage, because his mortgage will be denominated in a currency that nobody can spend, and therefore it will be worth a lot less. So servicing his mortgage, he'll be able to buy the old currency at a few cents on the dollar, and he'll have a lot more money in his pocket to spend on other things. So in that respect, it'll be great for the economy, because the man in the street will have less outgoings. His mortgage will be effectively over a short period of time wiped out to nothing. So will his old credit card debt. And the same thing will apply to corporations. Almost all large corporations have got large borrowings, which in a currency reset will continue to be denominated in the old currency. And over time, they'll be writing down the value of those liabilities and booking a.
Hence why the equities will crash as part of this process, but later pump once this acknowledgement of cleaned balance sheets has taken place. But the difference is, will banks get to repossess oligarchical mega corporates for their lending? Apple has way more power to fight off a bank than you do on a leveraged home, in my opinion, with all the lobbyists and political donations and everything else that it does, and the surveillance, dark state finance work that it does. Let's go back to that.
Profit, as they write it down as a foreign exchange profit. So it'll be very good for companies who'll be writing down their debt. It'll be very good for the government, who will no longer see their national debt as a problem for the economy. It'll be very good for the man in the street who have no a mortgage which is now denominated in a currency which doesn't exist, and his credit card is wiped out, so he'll be able to start spending again. The government won't need to take money out of your pay packet to service a national debt, which it doesn't care about anymore. So I think actually, once we pass the reset, it'll be very good for the global economy, and we could see an economic boom, the likes of which we saw back in the 1950s when America was pumping money into the whole world.
And some people might say, what if they turn your old debt into the new CB? If they make an exchange and you have your mortgage in CBDC, you don't think they'll do that? That would defeat the purpose.
Well, that would be because that would mean that the asset holder has CBDCs which you can spend, and we mustn't forget that the crisis will be arising because people are panicking about the currency. They're trying to get rid of the old currency. If you convert all the old currency, and therefore all the old bonds and all liabilities and assets, into the new currency, you're just converting old pounds to new pounds, and it's the same thing. So no, I think the whole idea of CBDC.
But there's a point that's missed here. That was, in essence, a good question. Is all the benefits that the government will get from having old dollar debt and now introducing a new system and then tapering the value of the old dollar, basically killing the debt, are they going to come and say, we want that same benefit for you on your credit card and your mortgage? So his assumption is that all debt is equal and treated equal and will be trapped in the old dollar, and therefore everyone who's indebted gets a gift. That's what he says. What if they say, and they categorize all government debt in one particular way, and otherwise all bank-related debt to a retail level in another way? So could you have potentially a carryover of all your liabilities as retail into the new system in CBDCs, and bonds and the government-based debt market is the only debt market that is now in old dollars and left to taper? I don't know. To just assume that all debt will be treated in the same way You have the central bank created and bond market with the primary dealers related debt. And then you have intermediaries like retail banks that have created debt with you. What's to say they treat it all the same? Is it possible that they divide the benefits to the Fed created debt and those that received it, like the banks, and the banks get the old dollar tapered down? The Fed is essentially a bust entity, but no longer exists, comes re-phoenixes under a different name, and is just the same group of captured individuals that they've always been, now in charge of CBDCs. But the debt that the banks have by holding these things have all just been tapered to naught. But retail people get carried over with their debts. Do they really want you to be all? You see, in a sense, he might be too capitalistic and too benign of intent. He thinks we'll all get the benefit of a tapering old dollar in terms of the debt. I think it's quite possible. It can't be ruled out. I don't have odds, I don't know probabilities, but I think the possibility does exist that any debt that you have can be carried over. So certain things will be put through the fast lane of yours. Your assets and your ownership are going to be hard. They're going to have to be broken into little bits, and you're going to get forced through the old dollar, and you're going to get tapered to zero on anything you get for them. Fine. Your debts might be treated differently and might just get fast tracked through into the new digital currency. We don't know. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. Has he even considered the possibility of that?
Yeah. Sorry, you're not solving the problem then, yeah? Sorry.
No. So I believe that.
Remember, they want to solve the debt problem mainly for the government and the banking system. They don't want to solve your debt problem. That's not what they're about. Could they pass it as a gift to those that are highly indebted? Possibly. But I don't see it as a fait accompli.
Monetary assets, fiat-denominated assets, will, to a large extent, remain in the old currency and not be converted. But they don't want a riot on their hands, so of course they're going to convert everything that
they do want a riot on their hands. It's problem, reaction, solution. But they will have so many other reasons for rioting, like supply chain, access to food, water, weaponized BLM will show up, or equivalents, and an Antifa will show up, and then a counter movement to the BLM and the counter movement to the Antifa, and then the white boys, the angry boys, the racist boys, the neo-Nazi boys, etc., etc., etc. Police, various other martial law actually will come out. It will be lockdowns on a counter martial law. Citizens will be fired on by military. We predicted this all along. And many of them will be actually the innocent ones, much like they were rounding up and whipping grannies for not wearing masks in parks and various other things, whilst actually taking a knee to a militarized BLM marching around London with automatic weapons and truncheons. So you're going to get all these perversions of state that are already in existence being amplified to actually put you in a state of disbelief, shock, and horror. So they do want disillusionment. They want you in the lowest energetic state of stress and confusion, so that actually there's no way a rational, clever activation of a response is engaged. Just emotive responses. So they need you responding emotionally. They need to provoke non-rational responses. And putting you under stress, denying you of sleep, food, and access to normal amenities, and turning the world upside down absolutely puts you in fear. And that is a low energy state that is extremely useful for draconian dominance.
Small guy owns, and the small guy will be okay, but the government's going to decide who wins and who loses. And I guess it's not going to be the wealthy, and I guess it's not going to be the foreign governments.
And do you worry about the?
Well, foreign governments. So first of all, again, I think the division is a little bit wrong. It's not like the enemy so much are foreign governments. This is a war of government against us. All governments against their citizens. So foreign governments will be doing a similar thing in their countries simultaneously. We live in a leper colony. Show me who's doing sound money. Show me who hasn't done debt proliferation as their model. All have been synchronized and all are World Economic Forum, and the marks are you, the citizen, the sheep. So this is not one government fucking another government. They're all simultaneously fucking their citizens. That's the game. That's the framing. It is citizen fuckery. And it is a disempowerment, a suppression. It's a lockstep agenda. And it's a wholesale wealth sharing that needs to take place. So, again, a point of and I mean, I have the reset sniper hat as well as the market sniper and the crypto sniper hat. He has a financial hat, which may equate, say, to my market sniper one. So you might not, in my opinion, I think I'm accurate on that, but I could be wrong as ever. But I have high confidence that we're accurate. But he doesn't see things through a reset filter per se. So he's not lying or misinforming. He's been a good guest and a great topic of discussion. And I would love to interview Clive, and I'm going to reach out to him. The key point is he doesn't have the reset framing, and that's fine. I'm comfortable with the fact that a certain segment of the population gets that, and I think I'm one of them. But I can be deluded tinfoil hat just as much, and maybe he's right. But the point is, it is going to be occurring in all countries simultaneously at different levels. It's going to look like the spontaneous contagion that has created all of this. Much like you had COVID globally, and COVID restrictions were all pretty universal. Wear a mask, stay 2 meters away. Where was that different? Just the language that they told you and the degree to which they enforced it changed. The rules were all pretty much the same.
The fact that they're talking about programming CBDCs, I mean, that's the tyrannical part of it.
Yeah. I think if they do this, it's inevitably going to be programmable, whether we like it or not. All I can say is I'm very happy to live here in Switzerland because nothing can happen in Switzerland without a referendum. I mean, we literally vote on pointless things like dog poo or what day you can hang your washing hat. We also vote on very important things like.
That's a false point of security. So the best part of the conversation I've just reviewed, but I'll just leave a comment on that. I'm safer than you. I'm in Switzerland. Actually, you get to vote on things that are meaningless. You haven't got to vote that Switzerland actually holds the HQs for most dark states. You haven't got to vote whether CERN should be doing whatever the fuck they're doing in the hole in the ground there in Switzerland. You get to vote whether petrol stations should stay open past a certain time from a Labour point of view, and they voted no. People should be allowed to go home and they don't need to be 24/7. That is the best slave is a slave that thinks he's free because he's being given decisions that are very much mundane and at his level. You don't get to vote that the World Economic Forum in Switzerland, Germany has all its leaders proliferate. Many of them live in Switzerland, that agenda will come in. If he thinks, let me just let him finish that. He said all the Swiss will turn down a CBDC. I'm lucky I live in Switzerland. No, you absolutely won't get to vote on the CBDC in Switzerland, because if it's global, it will be global with you too. In fact, a lot of what the Swiss National Bank has done has been non-supportive of the Swiss franc. Should be by far the single strongest currencies. They've been buying euros to maintain a fake peg. They've been buying equities. They've been doing lots of things that actually Swiss people should have refused. They have tried to get gold reinstated as a monetary base, and it was voted away. They probably cheated the election. This whole notion that anything that's meaningful, you will get a say on, is absolutely untrue. You'll get a say on many of the things that will give you the impression that you voted on something meaningful and that you have power. And the real things that are incredibly important will be bypassed or introduced by sleight of hand over a period of various leaders and various other mechanisms. So I'll just give a pushback on that. But I understand that illusion. And again, I like Clive, and I think he's contributed immensely to this topic. And I absolutely respect him as a human being, and I thank him for his contribution to Maneco's show. It was fascinating. And just because I have a difference of opinion doesn't mean I don't respect immensely what he's come and done. And I am superimposing my own personal viewpoints as a result of Reset over this entire discussion. So where does that leave us? It's a very interesting concept and discussion. The big departure points is, will a debt benefit that sees the entire debt system going through the eye of the needle and be scraped off, and just the little ant makes it through, and all the turd bag that he's been carrying that's got ever bigger falls behind? Will the benefit of a depreciating old dollar, collapsing bond market that no one will want as part of the history, and will become an anecdote, and owning such a thing will be like holding a Zimbabwe dollar for a conversational piece? Will you get past that benefit for being able to get super indebted? On one hand, I think it's possible, because who gets to be the most indebted? Governments and billionaires. Billionaires and oligopolies. So billionaires are typically CEOs of and major shareholders of and founders of macro billionaire corps, that borrow for next to nothing and huge amounts. You don't, on your credit card overdraft at a bank, at a retail banking level, get to borrow at anything like what they get to borrow. And you may find that there's a retail debt experience that sees conversion to CBDCs, and that there's a commercial lending that doesn't. However, if you were to get that gift, then borrowing might be a great thing to do. However, during this birthing process, where essentially your head is being squeezed through a tight vaginal passage, and you could suffocate under the duress of extreme rental spikes that only the billionaire class, who will be able to have special collateral, are already borrowing at a far more beneficial rates terms, might survive, and you get assets stripped of your leverage asset, is a big question. Because if I was so confident that everything that applies to a government that's going to be devaluing its debt will apply, and a billionaire that's going to be devaluing his debt will apply for me, I will go on a borrowing spree and secure income producing assets second to none. How can I have that level of confidence in a system that has continued to perpetuate one rule for them and another rule for me? That is a sweeping statement that I do not see as bringing me any form of comfort, which means the only thing to do is to actually not have the Trojan internal potential controlled demolition that is a debt instrument that can have a rate spike and have the equivalent of blowing out your central pillar to your finances on a mega spike of rates, where different rules for retail debt will apply than those that have done commercial credit lines. As a result of that, I still do not feel comfortable with debt, and feel the safest thing is an asset that you hold in your hand that you can transport with you by virtue of holding it in your hand, providing you are never a forced seller, which requires you to do immense preparation on everything else that will bring you food, water, energy, and warmth. So warm climates are your friend. The likelihood that you'll freeze in winter is greatly reduced. This is your friend. It will still be there after the bottleneck vaginal birthing of a surveillance financial state. Many other things that are of a digital nature, as witnessed by recent FTX events, as witnessed by possible money in a bank account, that will all be deemed. Remember, the banks themselves may be sacrificed. The retail banks may indeed be sacrificed themselves, as the relationship becomes a wallet-based blockchain new reality, CBDC, whereby you have a direct relationship with government, which will be dark state central banker. and you could see the retail banking world entirely fail, and those assets, the debt that they lent you, being rolled up into a big insolvency company, which will pursue you in the new world for that debt, and it may be remonetized at 1:1, whilst the old debt was tapered to zero and no longer can be purchased in a black market run by a bunch of Israelis. That is the only other non-vaginal birthing path for getting into the other side and the new system. This secret highway that you'll all be forced through on the black market into there. Those are a couple of thoughts that I have on this, and that is why I don't feel comfortable with stocking up on debt, because it could work against you. But that does mean you don't get to own a lot more assets. You don't get to own them unless you can borrow in the same way that Apple does, with a commercial lending line from the same commercial bank at the same commercial rate. Then please do buy up every farm, buy up every income producing asset, even though they will dip in value during the vag passageway with the subsequent gateway. But once the first breath of CBDC non-life existence takes place, you will then have assets that will likely appreciate in a new debt-free world. Okay, thanks for listening. This scribbly mess, it's a pure Picasso of great note, but it's a fascinating discussion, and I want to thank both these guys. And I will reach out in due course to both to potentially see if we can have a further discussion in and around that. And I'd like to challenge a little more hard on those topics that I have raised. So we will save this monstrosity of a beautiful drawing that only a dyslexic, look at that, isn't it beautiful, highway of colors. And we will catch up with you later. So thanks for watching.